Who is he, Sarah? Don't lie to me. My voice was shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from anger or heartbreak. Sarah stood across from me, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. The dim kitchen light cast shadows on the walls, making the space between us feel even larger than it was. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen dark now, but I had seen the name before she locked it. Mark, again. I took a step closer, gripping the edge of the counter. You've been working late almost every night. You're always on your phone, smiling at messages that aren't from me. And now this? A weekend trip? Sarah, don't insult me by pretending I'm imagining things. She let out a shaky breath, finally looking up at me. Her blue eyes, once so full of warmth, now held something else. Fear, maybe, or regret. It's not what you think, she whispered. I laughed bitterly. Not what I think? Then tell me, Sarah, what exactly am I supposed to think when my wife is sneaking around, dressing up for work like she's going on a date, and hiding her phone like a teenager with a secret? She was silent. That silence told me everything. The weight of the truth crushed down on me, and suddenly, I couldn't stand to be in the same room. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. How long? Daniel, how long, Sarah? I demanded, spinning back to face her. She swallowed hard. A few months. A sharp pain shot through my chest like someone had driven a knife straight into my ribs. Jesus! I never meant for it to happen, she rushed to say. It was stupid, a mistake. It started as nothing, just talking, but then… She choked on her words. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? My voice cracked. Why wasn't I enough? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not now, not after this. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing outside, but inside this house, our home, everything was breaking apart. Finally, I exhaled sharply and shook my head. I need to get out of here. Daniel, please. But I was already walking away. Just a few hours earlier, I had still believed in the illusion of our marriage. I had ignored the warning signs, convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I had known something was wrong. We had been that couple, the one people admired, the one with the picture-perfect life. College sweethearts who had built everything together, a beautiful home in the suburbs, a son, Jake, who was our whole world. For years, I thought we were untouchable. But now, standing alone in the darkened living room, the weight of reality pressing down on me, I realized how fragile it had all been, how blind I had been. The first cracks had been small. A shift in her behavior, her sudden increase in late nights at work. At first, I brushed it off. Sarah had always been ambitious. Then came the secrecy, the way she guarded her phone, how she turned away when she texted, the perfume that wasn't hers, the laughter I heard from the other room that wasn't for me. I had told myself it was stress, a rough patch, anything but what it actually was, because the alternative was too painful to accept. Until tonight. The night I found out, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, every kiss that now felt like a lie. I thought about Jake, about what this meant for him. How was I supposed to tell my son that the life we built was falling apart? Sarah had tried to talk to me, but I couldn't hear her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Morning came and the reality settled in. I had a choice to make. I could pretend this never happened, forgive Sarah, try to fix what was broken. But how do you rebuild trust once it's been shattered? Or I could walk away. Let go of the dream we had built and start over, even if it meant tearing my heart in two. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The weeks following the discovery of Sarah's affair were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like I was living in a fog, going through the motions of daily life while my mind was consumed by questions, anger, and heartbreak. Sarah and I were still living under the same roof, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. We decided to try to work things out for Jake's sake, if nothing else. Sarah cut off all contact with Mark, and we started going to couples therapy. At first, it seemed like we were making progress. Sarah was remorseful, and she did everything she could to show me she was committed to fixing our marriage. But no matter how hard we tried, things weren't the same. I couldn't look at her without seeing those texts. I couldn't trust her when she said she was working late. Every time she smiled at her phone, I wondered if she was texting someone else. The trust was gone, and without trust, there was no foundation for our marriage. The breaking point came about 6 months after I found out about the affair. Sarah had been working late again, and when she came home, she seemed distant. I asked her how her day was, and she gave me a vague answer before disappearing into the bathroom. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed her phone and checked her messages. There was nothing incriminating, but the fact that I felt the need to check was a sign that things were never going to be the same. That night, we had a huge fight. I told her I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live in a marriage where I felt like I had to constantly monitor her every move. She cried and begged me to give her another chance, but I was done. We decided to separate. Sarah moved out, and I stayed in the house with Jake. It wasn't easy, especially with Jake caught in the middle. He was only 7 at the time, and he didn't understand why Mommy and Daddy weren't living together anymore. Sarah tried to stay involved in his life, but it was clear she was struggling. She'd call me crying, saying she regretted everything and wanted to come home. But it was too late. The damage was done. Life after the separation was a roller coaster. Jake was struggling to adjust to the new normal, and I was doing my best to be there for him while dealing with my own emotions. I threw myself into work and being the best dad I could be, but it was exhausting. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be spiraling. She'd call me at all hours of the night, crying and begging for another chance. She'd show up at the house unannounced, claiming she just wanted to see Jake, but it was clear she was hoping to win me back. After a year of separation, we decided to file for divorce. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. We both needed to move on, and staying in a broken marriage wasn't doing either of us any good. The divorce process was messy. We fought over custody, finances, and even the smallest details of our settlement. It was exhausting, and it only added to the pain of everything we'd already been through. Once the divorce was finalized, things started to settle down, at least as much as they could. Jake was adjusting to the new normal, and I was starting to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work and being the best dad I could be, and slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be struggling. She'd lost a lot of friends when the affair came out, and her relationship with Mark didn't last. From what I've heard, he moved on to someone else pretty quickly. Here's the thing though, despite everything, I don't hate Sarah. I hate what she did, but I don't hate her. I see the regret in her eyes every time she picks Jake up for the weekend. I hear it in her voice when she calls to check on him. She made a mistake, a huge, life-altering mistake, and she's paying for it every day. But so am I, so is Jake. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trust is everything. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. And the consequences of cheating don't just affect the people involved, they ripple out and hurt everyone around them. So, to anyone out there thinking about cheating or even flirting with the idea, don't. It's not worth it. The temporary thrill isn't worth the lifelong regret. And to anyone who's been through something like this, you're not alone. It's hard and it hurts, but you'll get through it. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, there was a sense of relief. Relief that the constant tension and mistrust were finally over. On the other hand, there was a deep sadness. Sadness for the life we'd lost, for the family we'd broken, and for the future we'd never have. The first few months as a single dad were tough. Jake was struggling to adjust to the new normal, and I was doing my best to be there for him while dealing with my own emotions. I threw myself into work and being the best dad I could be, but it was exhausting. There were nights when I'd lie awake wondering if I'd made the right decision. Was I being too hard on Sarah? Should I have given her another chance? But every time I started to second-guess myself, I'd remember the pain of discovering her affair, and I'd remind myself that I'd made the right choice. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be spiraling. She'd call me at all hours of the night, crying and begging for another chance. She'd show up at the house unannounced, claiming she just wanted to see Jake, but it was clear she was hoping to win me back. It was hard to see her like that. Despite everything, I still cared about her, and it hurt to see her in so much pain. But I knew I couldn't let her back into my life, not after what she'd done. The turning point came about a year after the divorce. Sarah had been struggling to find her footing, and it was starting to take a toll on Jake. He'd come home from her place upset, saying that she seemed sad all the time, and that he didn't like seeing her like that. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let Jake suffer because of Sarah's mistakes. So I reached out to her and suggested we sit down and talk. We met at a coffee shop, just the two of us. It was the first time we'd been alone together since the divorce, and it was awkward at first. But as we started talking, I realized how much we'd both changed. Sarah apologized again for what she'd done, and this time it felt different. She wasn't just apologizing because she wanted me back. She was apologizing because she genuinely regretted her actions and the pain they'd caused. We talked about Jake and how we could co-parent more effectively. We agreed to put our differences aside and focus on what was best for him. It wasn't easy, but it was a step in the right direction. After that conversation, things started to improve. Sarah seemed to be doing better, and Jake was happier. We still had our moments of tension, but for the most part, we were able to co-parent without too much drama. As for me, I started to feel like myself again. I threw myself into work and being the best dad I could be, and slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my life. Here's the thing though, despite everything, I don't hate Sarah. I hate what she did, but I don't hate her. I see the regret in her eyes every time she picks Jake up for the weekend. I hear it in her voice when she calls to check on him. She made a mistake, a huge, life-altering mistake, and she's paying for it every day. But so am I, so is Jake. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trust is everything. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. And the consequences of cheating don't just affect the people involved. They ripple out and hurt everyone around them. So, to anyone out there thinking about cheating or even flirting with the idea, don't. It's not worth it. The temporary thrill isn't worth the lifelong regret. And to anyone who's been through something like this, you're not alone. It's hard and it hurts, but you'll get through it. It's been 3 years since the divorce, and life has settled into a new rhythm. Jake is now 10 years old, and he's adjusted to the new normal better than I ever could have hoped. Sarah and I have found a way to co-parent effectively, and while things aren't perfect, they're better than they were in the early days of the separation. Co-parenting hasn't been easy. There are still moments of tension, especially when it comes to making big decisions about Jake's life. But for the most part, we've learned to put our differences aside and focus on what's best for him. Sarah has been more involved in Jake's life lately, and I can see how much it means to him. He loves spending time with her, and I'm grateful that they've been able to rebuild their relationship. Sarah's regret is still palpable. Every time she picks Jake up for the weekend, I can see the sadness in her eyes. She's tried to move on, but it's clear that she's still haunted by the choices she made. She's apologized to me more times than I can count, and while I've forgiven her, I can't forget. The trust we once had is gone, and I don't think it will ever fully return. As for me, I've been on a journey of self-discovery. I've thrown myself into work and being the best dad I can be, and I've started to rebuild my life. I've dated a little, but it's hard to trust anyone after what happened with Sarah. I've had a few relationships that didn't work out, but I'm not giving up. I know that one day I'll find someone who values trust and loyalty as much as I do. Jake has been my rock through all of this. He's a resilient kid, and he's handled the changes in his life with a maturity that's beyond his years. He still asks questions about why Sarah and I aren't together, and I do my best to answer them honestly without placing blame. I want him to understand that sometimes relationships don't work out, but that doesn't mean we love him any less. Looking ahead, I'm hopeful. I've learned a lot about myself through this experience, and I'm stronger because of it. I know that no matter what life throws at me, I can handle it. Sarah and I will always be connected through Jake, and while our relationship will never be what it once was, I'm grateful that we've been able to find a way to co-parent effectively. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trust is everything. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. And the consequences of cheating don't just affect the people involved, they ripple out and hurt everyone around them. So, to anyone out there thinking about cheating or even flirting with the idea, don't. It's not worth it. The temporary thrill isn't worth the lifelong regret. And to anyone who's been through something like this, you're not alone. It's hard and it hurts, but you'll get through it.